What a lovely morning it is turning out to be. There are butterflies everywhere. The sunflowers are starting to bloom. Everything in the garden is just looking absolutely beautiful. So I wasn't really sure how successful this last planting of sunflowers was going to be, but we have so many sunflowers around the whole entire garden. I'm building my sunflower wall, which is something I'm trying to strive for every single season. And it makes the bees super happy, and I just love walking around and seeing all the bees like very calmly at work. And just so you know, I am recovering from a little bit of a head cold if I sound like I'm sick. I can't believe I am sick yet again. It's these dang kids, you guys. Before I had kids, I literally would go years without being sick, like literally years. And now that I have kids that are, you know, of like the preschool age, it's just like a constant thing. I started gardening, you know, years ago in a little house with just like a typical backyard, like size backyard. There were always certain things I attempted to grow that I was never able to grow, or maybe I did grow and it wasn't like in abundance. It was like one or two things from that plant before it kind of died off. So that's why some things I kind of take you guys through and I go, this is so cool, because it's like that moment that I had been looking for years of attempting to grow one of those things, and that would be the snow peas. The good thing about snow peas is that they're like an excellent snack, absolutely great snack. We just walk out here and just pick them all the time. You can eat the whole pod. It's amazing. Walking around, you know, when it's like the sunset time and just kind of looking at the flowers and things like that while we're eating a handful of snow peas. So it's really, really nice. What do I do with all of these snow peas? This is crazy. So recently I did learn about snow peas is that they are actually a nitrogen fixer in your soil. I didn't know that before, and it is recommended if you are going to grow snow peas, don't fertilize right before you're growing the snow peas, because they're pretty much fertilizing the soil themselves, and all that's going to happen if you fertilize too heavily before growing them is you might have more greenery than actual pea pods. So I've got what I need for a dinner, just a little appetizer for sauteing, and I actually need to harvest some of these banana peppers too. I can't even believe I'm sitting here saying I'm about to harvest some banana peppers in December, but I am. That is the beautiful part about growing in Florida, is you just really never know what the season's going to hold. We're still getting a little decent harvest, which will probably be one of our last harvests until spring, and I definitely plan to overwinter these, which I'm not really sure how much I'll actually need to, just outside of protecting them from any type of potential frost. In like late January to February, we might have a handful of days of frost. I've had a few people ask, like, why are you growing certain things right now? How many days of frost? It could be collectively about 7 days of frost in a whole year. So that's why we're still able to kind of throw spaghetti at a wall and see what sticks. We're getting a decent harvest so far, and these are all things that I really enjoy to eat. So moving on to eggplant. This is actually really cool because I didn't even intend for this to be a harvest video, but now we're at that point in the fall garden where you just never know what you're gonna get when you walk out here. I should have brought my little like hand little scissors for the garden, but I'll make do without them. So we've got a good amount of eggplant right now, which is, I cannot believe we are still growing eggplant, and it is December 3rd today. So this is very, very cool. I'm here at one of my new like kale and lettuce beds. So I just wanted to give you guys an update because we did some transplanting the other day and I was really rough on the transplants. But I just wanted to kind of give you an example that they are more hardy than you think. Kale is a really good example of a plant that can withstand kind of like a heavy hand with transplants, or like when all of the roots start to kind of get intertwined. Now, it's not a good idea to allow them to get to this size necessarily when the roots are intertwined and you kind of start a bunch of seeds in one pot, but these are they're pretty tolerant to transplanting later, and they're thriving, they're doing really good. So I just wanted to give you an update on that. And I also transplanted some lettuce in here. This is the Italian lettuce that I told you guys about a few weeks ago. And the reason why these ones are really small is because I had them all in the collective pot for a really long time, and the roots were so intertwined. It was like a matted set of roots, and I just pulled them all out very gently, kind of separated them, put them in here, and they're all just fine. None of them are injured and they're thriving. Right here I have my first beet ready to harvest of the season. We planted all of these together, so it's super exciting to be able to show you guys when some of these things are ready to harvest. I am so hit and miss with growing beets, and for some reason I love them. And I think the reason why I love them is because they are like hard to grow for me. I don't know why. So like I was saying before, like I really appreciate the crops that are more challenging for me when I'm actually able to harvest them. So if you are like that, if there's something that you are struggling with, definitely drop a comment and let me know, because I always think it's really interesting. Some people, they're like, oh, I've got, you know, zucchini and squash coming out my ears, and then some people are like, I can't grow a tomato, you know, or a squash or whatever to save my life. But it is very exciting to finally be able to harvest a beautiful beet. Now I don't know what I'm gonna do with this perfect beet. Oh my goodness. It looks so good. And the roots are like absolutely pink. I just feel like when a crop is this vibrant, you know that means it's super healthy. So I think I'm just gonna roast it and maybe just put it like on a salad or one of our meals. Over here I'm at my butternut squash area, and I can't tell if they're like still trying to hang on, if I should get rid of them or not, but some of these are definitely ready to harvest. I've got at least 3. They're a nice deep orange color, well, kind of like a beige kind of color, and I've allowed them to sit out here to naturally cure in the sun because I don't have any type of way as of right now to cure things in the house. So sometimes I actually just let these winter squash that do need to cure just stay out here and naturally cure so that they can last longer in the house. But honestly, we're gonna eat these up like right away. I legitimately had no plans on making this a harvest video, but I'm very happy that it happened to turn out that way, because now we have at least like a week's worth of vegetables to incorporate in a lot of different meals. I still have a few more things to harvest, so let's get to it. So I've got my purple beans right now, which are just shooting out a good amount of beans. The sun is a little intense right now, but we're gonna go over to this front garden bed because it needs a lot of weeding. And I also wanna show you what like this hot and cold weather has done to some of my like sprouting broccoli. So as you can see, we've got some sprouting broccoli here that has gone to seed. And if you aren't familiar with sprouting broccoli, it is, or shooting broccoli, I actually forgot what this variety was. It's just a variety that you can kind of clip off more and harvest more off of, and they're generally going to be like a thinner in stalks. So because these are probably, you know, a lot smaller, they're more susceptible to going to seed when the weather gets really out of control. If they start to go to seed, you'll definitely want to prevent the plant from doing that, because then it's going to think it's run its life cycle. It has been dramatically cold, at least for us in Florida, and also dramatically hot. Like literally 3 days of very cold where we had the fireplace on and it was so nice, and then 3 days of turning the AC on because it's hot. So these plants are losing their minds and not really knowing what to do. And I just hope that my bigger broccoli and cabbage and cauliflower, I just hope that those don't start to go to seed with all this like hot and cold, because it's actually supposed to be pretty cold next week as well. It's literally like a wave right now going on in Florida. I've got some beautiful broccoli, cauliflower, a Romanesco variety. We've got some cabbage and everything. And if these start getting upset at our inconsistent weather and going to seed, I'll be sad, because we have a lot of them right now. So I'm showing you all of these back here, a good amount of these in here. Like I said in a few videos before, I just wanted to walk around and load every bed up with as much like brassicas as possible, because this is the season. We don't typically get to grow this type of stuff, especially in the summertime. I mean, forget about it. You might get lucky, but for me, it's not going to happen. So anyways, just kind of wanted to give you an update on what is going on, or what's growing on in the garden right now. There's a lot of positivity, and it is just, I did not anticipate doing that type of a harvest today. It's super cool to walk out here and now be at a place where I don't have to buy as many vegetables or anything like that at the grocery store, because we eat a lot of vegetables at our house, which I'm sure isn't shocking to anybody, but it's expensive, and you know, it's a lot better just to be growing this stuff at home. And I will be taking you guys inside to show you how I'm going to be cooking up a lot of those vegetables. Typically what I'll do after I do any type of a harvest is wash the vegetables as soon as I get into the house. That way I know that they are clean and ready to go if I need to use them for a recipe. So first I'll rinse them under running water, and then I will soak them in a vinegar and water solution just to kind of sanitize them, kill off any type of bacteria or any type of like fruit fly eggs, which is actually my main concern. I started a loaf of sourdough the day before, so I wanted just to pop that in the oven after I was done washing the vegetables. I'm always so excited when it is finally time to bake off a loaf of sourdough. Now this is a recipe I am working on, so I'm not going to be featuring the recipe in the description. It was really good, but I will say it definitely needs some work. It's like a cinnamon raisin molasses sourdough loaf, so I am very excited to show that to you guys once I have worked out all of the kinks. I've just become so obsessed with perfecting my skills in sourdough that I'm honestly baking every 2 to 3 days, sometimes more than that, because I really want to understand this process and start figuring out some awesome recipes. So you're definitely going to see a lot more sourdough content on my channel, because it's just something that I have become obsessed with. Speaking of sourdough, I wanted to start my sourdough focaccia bread for dinner that night. This takes a few hours, of course, to proof, so that's why I just got it started right after cleaning all the vegetables. And I also got the garlic roasting too, that way I could just set it aside and have it ready for when I was going to top the focaccia that night. You'll see here in a second, I put all of my veggie scraps in a plastic bag to use later and make a bunch of veggie broth with it about once or twice a week. So now we're back in the kitchen later, and it is time for me to start getting dinner prepped that night. Now these are the little butternut squash that we all just harvested together, which is such a cool feeling. I love going straight from the garden to the kitchen to our plates. It is a very, very cool feeling for us. I just ended up cutting them in half, putting some oil and salt on each half, of course shelling out all the seeds, and then flipping them over and roasting them in the oven at 350 degrees for about 40 to 45 minutes until they're fork tender. Do you guys remember that beet we all just harvested together? Well, here she is. So I'm also just roasting this beet along with the butternut squash and the garlic at the same time. I covered the beet with some oil and salt after taking all the skin off and just put it in there with everything else. Don't discard the beet leaves. You can roll those up, chop them, and toss them into anything that you're cooking with. That way you can take advantage of every part of the beet. Now that my butternuts are done roasting, it's time to get them out of the oven and into the blender so that we can make some beautiful sauce. In the blender, I added just 1 cup of milk, and then I ended up later adding another cup of milk because I thought it needed just to be a little bit looser for the sauce. Also ended up adding 1 cup of cheese in a saucepan and just mixing that all together and cooking for just a few minutes until everything was combined. Then I moved on to sauteing the sausage with some onions. This was so delicious. I seasoned with salt and pepper, a little bit of garlic and onion powder as well. And I also tossed in those beet leaves, and I also tossed in the actual beet that was cut up too. So it was a really healthy mix that was very tasty. So this is pretty typical. If I'm doing some type of a harvest, I'm going to get creative with adding things that wouldn't necessarily go together, but you end up making something really unique and interesting. And now I think, oh my gosh, roasted beets is such a good addition to a dish like this that I maybe necessarily wouldn't have done if I was just going to the grocery store. I wouldn't have just bought beets and then decided to do this. So that's the beautiful part about gardening, is that there's more flexibility with testing recipes and adding things because you have such an abundance. And let me just say, that was a very delicious pasta dish. If you are having a hard time getting your kids to want to eat any type of vegetables and things, blend up some butternut squash. They're not going to know the difference, and they're just going to eat it and think it's just macaroni and cheese. So very, very good. Moving on to the focaccia, I just squeezed out my garlic and topped it on top of the dough. It ended up being so delicious. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today and doing some gardening, doing some cooking. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a like and consider subscribing if you want to see some more.